Hello, Petals. How are you doing? How's everything going? Are you having a good week? Sorry there's been a bit of a delay, but you know how life is these days. Hopefully it will balance out. I'm just crossing my fingers. It's all going to balance out. So, how's your autumn going? Are you enjoying the fall colours? Or do you have a summer? Or do you have a springtime? Who knows? I'm a bit wiped out today, so I'm a bit lacking in energy and must apologise for that. But we are determined today to bring you Chapter 17 of Paint Your Dragon by the amazing Mr. Tom Holt. If you enjoy the chapter, as ever, if you could give me a little likey like on the likey like button, that would be amazing. And it always keeps the lights on and let us know that the channel keeps going. And as the comment from my other was made, that we do really have a really nice little community here, and I should always remember to say I'm very, very, very grateful that you're here. I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening. So, Chapter 17 of Paint Your Dragon by Tom Holt. The small man jumped out of his skin, whirled round and slapped a hand across her mouth. "Don't call me that, you crazy bitch," he hissed. "Come on, this way." He set off at a great pace, not looking around. Bianca had to break into a trot to keep up. He was shorter and squarer than she'd expected, but he moved as if he was tall, lean and wiry. Another one of those unquiet spirits in a moss-bross body. It was as though the whole world was on its way to a fancy dress party. "Okay," he said, finally halting. "We can talk here." Maybe, Bianca thought, but hearing what we say is going to be another matter entirely. In reply to her earlier question, where can we meet, Kurt had suggested New Street Station. They were now in the bar of a pub in John Bright Street, empty except for the barman, and the loudest background music on earth. This was foreground music. It filled all the available space, like polyfiller. "Thank you for coming," Kurt said. "Sorry?" "I said." Kurt edged his chair nearer and leaned forwards. "I said thanks for coming. Listen up, doll. This is a mess." Bianca frowned slightly. He told her briefly about the circumstances of his return to Earth, and she'd reckoned doll was a bit rich, coming from an animated action man. Given the communication difficulties, so she just let it slide. Note, to save time and to preserve the Niagara-like cadences of the dialogue, all the back chat, "Sorry, what did you say? Speak up, for Christ's sakes, damn it, there's no need to shout, etc., has been edited, as a result of which this passage has already been awarded the Golden Scissors at the 1996 Editor of the Year Awards and the BSI Kite Mark." "I know," Bianca replied. "You made it sound like there was something you could do about it." "There is," Kurt replied, sipping his baby sham. Narrator's note, have you ever had a baby sham? Frickin' mingin'. I digress. "But not on my own. That's where you come in." "I see." "Doubt that." Kurt finished his bag of pork scratchings. Narrator's note, pork scratchings all my life. I digress. Pork scratchings, pork crackling, pork rinds. My goodness, I don't even understand the whole thing about pork scratchings. If somebody could explain to me the allure of eating something akin to concrete and like covered in salt, then that'd be great. I digress. Doubt that. Kurt finished his bag of pork scratchings, squashed up the packet and dropped it onto the ashtray before lighting a cigar. A large cigar, needless to say. Bianca had seen smaller things being floated down Canadian rivers. "Let me just fill you in on the background. Maybe you know some of the stuff. I don't at that." Between them, it transpired, they had a fairly good idea of the story so far, including recent developments and a progress report on the preparations for the big fight. "So you see," Kurt summarised, "it's all a goddamn shambles." "Quite," Bianca nodded vigorously. "Worst part of it is, I can't seem to work out who's who. Goodies and baddies, I mean." "This," Kurt replied sternly, "ain't the movies. When you've been in supernatural pest control as long as me, you learn not to make judgments about people. Sure, when I was young, I used to worry about that kind of thing, you know. What harm did he ever do to me, and all that kind of shit. Nowadays, all I ask myself is, will the 250 grain hollow point do the business at 350 yards? I guess it makes life easier, not giving a damn. You do, though, don't you? Kurt nodded glumly. It's a bitch, he replied. Unprofessional. That's what's got to me about this stinking job. Trouble is, my professional ethics say I gotta do the job I'm being paid for. Nothing in the rules says I can't share my concerns with an outsider, though. Someone not in the business. Like yourself. Bianca shrugged. I've got professional ethics too, you know. Mostly they're to do with leaving chisel marks and not gluing back bits you accidentally break off. But I'm sure there's something in the code of practice about not letting dangerous statues fall into the wrong hands. I must look it up when I get back home. They looked at each other suspiciously across the Formica tabletop. Unlikely Confederates, if we're Confederates, Bianca muttered to herself, Bags I be Robert D. Lee, and an impossibly confused situation. In context, they were probably the least likely do-gooders in the whole dramatis personae, the hired killer and the arms dealer. Maybe it helped that Bianca also dealt in legs, heads and torsos. I guess, Kurt said slowly, in situations like this, all you can do is try and do the right thing. Shit, did I really say that? This stinking job is really getting to me. A statue's got to do what a statue's got to do. Sure. Now, what you gotta do is like this. Thank you for calling Acropolis Marble Wholesalers Limited. Unfortunately, there's no one here to take your call, so please leave a message after the tone. Meep. Hello, Bianca Wilson here. Could I have 17 7x3x3 Carrara white blocks, immediate delivery, COD, Birmingham? Thank you. Thank you for calling Hell. Unfortunately, there's no one here to take your call, so please leave a message after the tone. Alternatively, for reservations and party bookings, please dial the following number. Thank you. Thank you for calling Nakazana Associates. Unfortunately, there's no one here to take your call. Don't bother to leave a message. I know perfectly well who you are and what you want. I'm a fully qualified witch doctor. Thank you. Have you ever, Chubby said, apropos of nothing, been to Mongolia? The dragon looked at him. No idea, he said. I've been virtually everywhere, I think. But usually I don't stop and buy a guidebook. What's Mongolia? Chubby shrugged. Desert mostly, very empty. Not many people. Barren, too. Large parts of it have as close as a 0% fire risk as it's possible to get on this planet. The sort of place where you could have a sneezing fit without burning down 6 major cities. Sounds a bit dull, the dragon said. It is. Very. I could use a little tedium right now, the dragon said, scratching his nose with a harpoon-like claw. I take it you're working round to suggesting that I go there. Hate to lose you, Chubby replied. It's been great fun having you here and all that, but with all due respect, you're a bit hard on the fixtures and fittings. True. Actually, it beats me how you people can live in places like this without dying of claustrophobia. We're smaller than you are. We find it helps. The dragon yawned and stretched, inadvertently knocking an archway through the wall into the next room. Mongolia, then. What's your ulterior motive? Something to do with your time business? You know your trouble. You're cynical. Chubby frowned. Usually, with good cause, he added. As it so happens, there is a small job you could do for me while you're there. Nothing heavy. You might find it helps stave off death by anyway. Entirely up to you, though. Explain. Well, Chubby leaned back in his chair and hit the light switch. A projector started to run, covering the opposite wall, the only one still intact, with a huge, slightly blurred image of a vase of flowers upside down. Chubby clicked something, and the picture changed into a view of the Great Wall of China.
Familiar? Seen it before?
The dragon replied.
Doesn't mean anything to me, though. A wall is but a wall, a sigh is but a sigh.
Ah, Chubby clicked again. The Great Wall came closer. This, my old mate, is no ordinary wall. It's big, it's famous, and now here's where my interest in the damn thing lies. It's very, very old. The dragon smiled in the darkness.
Steeped in history, huh?
Positively saturated. Now, I got to thinking, sentiment aside, what does that lot actually do that a nice modern chain link fence couldn't do for a fraction of the maintenance costs? Whereas to me,
I get the picture.
The dragon interrupted, amused.
You want me to steal it?
Chubby clicked again. This time, the wall was covered in a view of the planet as seen from space. The Great Wall was dimly visible, a thin line faintly perceptible through wisps of untidy cloud, either that or a hair in the gate. As you can see for yourself, Chubby went on, it's the only man-made structure visible from outside the Earth's atmosphere, an eyesore. In other words, if mankind ever gets round to colonising the moon, I'll be doing them a favour.
Quite. What do you want me to do with it? After I've nicked it.
Click. View of a completely barren area of desert. Just leave it there. One of my people will deal with it. The dragon smiled.
A receiver of stolen walls. Offence.
How did I know you were going to say that? Narrator's note, I cannot escape dad jokes no matter where I go. Dad jokes and puns, honestly, they're everywhere. What am I going to do? I digress. Half an hour later, the same picture show, the same basic introduction.
Let's just make sure I've got this straight, George said. Your organisation is going to steal the Great Wall of China. And then they're going to dump it out there in the wilderness.
Not wilderness, George. Prime development site. We paid top dollar for that land. It has the advantage of being as far from anywhere as it's possible to get without having to wear an oxygen mask. George shrugged.
You know your own business, I suppose. What do you need me for?
Caretaker, basically, Chubby replied. I was just thinking, since your friend with the wings and the bad breath is still very much on the loose, you might quite fancy a month or so in the last place anybody would ever think of looking.
Good point.
George nodded decisively.
Much obliged to you. It'll be a pleasure.
The lights came back on.
Pleasure's all mine,
said Chubby.
A bit overcomplicated, surely.
Chubby scowled.
Listen, he said, I hate to bother you with silly, mundane things like the way I earn my living, but for the last couple of months, my business has been at a complete standstill. I've got orders I can't fill and staff on full wages sitting around with nothing to do. 2 birds, 1 stone, and everybody's happy.
The screen went blank, and the little red light, whose purpose Chubby had never quite been able to work out in all the years he'd had the wretched thing, blinked twice.
I'm not happy about this.
Tough. Sorry, but you said to find a way to get them both to the venue without arousing their suspicions, and that is what I've done. And now, if you don't mind, I've got work. The pain hit him like a falling roof. The intensity of pain largely depends on which part of the victim it affects. Chubby's soul hurt. Toothache is nothing in comparison.
Fuck you, Jeannie, he moaned. Let go, will you?
Inside his head, Chubby could hear laughter. It was a very frightening sound.
Chubby, please. After all we've been to each other, I think you can start calling me Nosha. All my friends do.
Fuck you, Nosha. And now will you please stop doing that before you break my head?
Any idea how much of your soul I now own?
I know you're curious. Go on, ask me.
The paean stopped, and Chubby collapsed into a chair. Let me see, he said, once he'd got his breath back. Well, for one thing, we haven't had nearly as much as your wish is my command, it's my pleasure to serve you bullshit lately, which I find rather significant, and all these cosy chats we've been having recently must be taking their toll. I've been trying very hard indeed not to think about it.
42%.
Shit.
No reason why that should be a problem, surely. We've always got on well enough, you and I.
Like a house on fire, Chubby replied. With you as the fire and me as the house. What happens to me when you get a majority stake? Do I die or vanish or what?
Perish the thought. It's just that we'll see even more eye to eye, that's all.
And when it reaches 100%?
Then I shall be free.
Hooray! Hooray! And what about me?
You will be one of the lucky ones, like Mr. Tanashima.
Chubby frowned. Don't know him. Who's he?
Mashito Tanashima. Born 1901, died 1945. He worked in a bicycle factory in Hiroshima, Japan. 7 minutes before the atomic bomb exploded, he was killed in a road accident.
Gosh! Chubby smiled bleakly. Lucky old me, huh? The screen flickered. The red light came on, and this time it stayed on.
Yes, let nobody say I'm not grateful.
Bianca stepped back to admire her work. A masterpiece, as always. 3 down, 14 to go. The biggest problem had been getting hold of the photographs. First, she'd tried the local paper, but they'd got suspicious and refused to cooperate. The victims' families had virtually set their dogs on her. Finally, she'd hit on the idea of sending Mike round pretending to be the organiser of a Sadly Grange disaster fund. She'd felt really bad about that, but he'd come away with all the photographs she needed. The walls of her studio were covered in them. Enlarged, reduced, montaged, computer-enhanced, until the very sight of them gave her the creeps. 16 very ordinary people who happened to have been in the Sadly Grange Civic Centre when it blew up. The victims. So far, she'd done Mrs. Blanchflower, Mrs. Gray and a Mr. Smith, and she was knackered. Straight portraiture, no dramatic poses or funny hats. They had to be as lifelike as possible, or the whole thing would be a waste of time. The worst part of it all was the responsibility, because she wasn't the one who was going to have to live with the consequences for the rest of her life if she made a mistake. Accidentally leave off a toe or get an arm out of proportion, and she'd be ruining somebody's life. To hell with that, she told herself. Makes it sound like they're doing me a favour. Yes, well, and whose dragon caused all this mess in the first place? Mike, she croaked, I need a brand new set of big chisels, another hide mallet and coffee, about 1.5 gallons. Would you? On my way. Mrs. Cornwall's nose. Could you do me a 6x4 enlargement of the wart? I can't see from this whether it's a straightforward spherical type or more of your cottage loaf job. No problem. She sighed, wiped her forehead with her sleeve. And when you've done that, she said, if you could see a way to making a start on roughing out Mrs. Ferguson with the angle grinder, I've marked her up, and it would save ever such a lot of time. Mrs. Ferguson, angle grinder, right you are. Oh, and Mike. Yes? Thanks. Mike laughed, without much humour. That's all right, he said. After all, what are friends for? Apart that is from heavy lifting, telling lies to next of kin, basic catering and other unpaid chores. I don't know. Moral support? Mike shrugged. Don't ask me, he said. My morals collapsed years ago. Be seeing you. Left alone, Bianca tried to clear her mind of everything except the technicalities of sculpture. Easier said than done. It was like clearing a pub on cup final night, only rather more difficult.
The hardest part, unexpectedly enough, was the way the faces from the photographs stayed in her mind, plastered across her retina like fly posters, even when her eyes were tight shut. That meant something, she felt sure, but she hadn't the faintest idea what. "Excuse me." Kurt stopped dead in his tracks, closed his eyes and counted to 10. Once upon a time, that particular ritual had been a foolproof method of keeping his temper. Now all it meant was that he lost his rag 10 seconds later. "Hi," he replied, cramming a smile onto his face, which had never been exactly smile-shaped at the best of times. These past few days, however, cheerful expression tended to perch apprehensively on his features, like a unicyclist crossing a skating rink. "Mr. Lundqvist," it was the Canova again. "May I have a word with you, please?"
"Lady."
Inside, the classical perfection of the Canova bivouacked all that was immortal of a Mrs. Blanchflower. By a prodigious effort of his imagination, Kurt had worked out a scenario where he could actually be pleased to see Mrs. Blanchflower, but it involved her being in the water and him being a 20-foot-long mako shark. The only reason why he hadn't yet mortally insulted her was because he never seemed to be able to get a word in edgeways. "Mr. Lundqvist," said the Canova. "Now, as you know, I'm the last person ever to complain about anything, but I really must protest in the strongest possible." Getting past Mrs. Blanchflower, of course, was the beginning, not the end, of the aggravation. She was the worst individual specimen. Yes, the gold medalist in the Pest Olympics, but there were 14 others right behind her sharing silver. And it's no real escape to elude one Muhammad Ali, only to be set upon by 14 Leon Spinks. "Shut up!" Kurt therefore bellowed, as he shouldered past the Canova into the main area of the Nissen hut. That brought him, albeit at a terrible cost, a whole half-second of dead silence. "And listen," he said. "Thank you. Now then, folks, gather round, and you'd better pay attention, because this is really important." 15 statues all started to complain at once. "Okay." Kurt backed away and climbed into a chair. "Okay," he repeated, just loud enough to be audible. "If you guys don't want to go home, that's up to you. Well, so long. It's been..." Silence. Well, virtual silence. Mrs. Hamstraw, by Bernini, finished her sentence about the sultanas in her muesli. She'd told him 3 times. The doctor had told her no sultanas. And Ms. Stones reiterated her threat of writing to Roger Cook for the 78th time. But apart from that, there was silence so complete, Kurt felt he knew what it must have been like at 5 to 9 on the first day of creation. "On the other hand," he went on, calm and quiet as a speaking clock, "anybody who wants out had better listen good. Now then, I still say that, after the last time..." The great goat turned his head about 27 degrees and scowled. "Thank you," he said in a voice you could have freeze-dried coffee in. "Shall we proceed?" A nice man, Dr. Thwaites. All his patients would have agreed, likewise his colleagues, his neighbours, even some of his relations. A kind man, for whom nothing would ever be too much trouble. A patient man, prepared to listen politely and attentively to every hypochondriac who ever thought mild indigestion was a heart attack. Narrator's note, hypochondria is actually a misnomer. It doesn't actually mean what it's actually means in colloquial vernacular. It basically, hypochondria, chondria being the heart, hypo being low, so it would be a low heart rate. So anyway, just thought I'd give you that bit of a brain worm. Look it up if you want to. Seriously, it's awesome. Anyway, I digress. A patient man, prepared to listen politely and attentively to every hypochondriac who ever thought mild indigestion was a heart attack, but flawed nevertheless. Albert Schweitzer was the same, and likewise Walt Disney. "If you insist," muttered the lesser goat. "Now then, where's that wretched skull?" because Dr. Thwaites, having paid Farmer Melrose 6 months' rent for conjuring rights on Lower Copse's meadow, was damned if he was going to forfeit half his money, £30.50, with 3 months still to run. It was, as far as he was concerned, a matter of principle. "When you're ready, Miss Frobisher, now then," he cleared his throat, "by Asmodee and Beelzebub, I conjure you, spirits of—" He stopped. If someone had just popped an apple in his mouth, they couldn't have shut him up quicker or more effectively. "Don't mind us," said the captain of spectral warriors in a soft, speaking in church voice. "Just pretend we aren't here, okay?" The great goat would dearly have liked to do just that. But unfortunately, it was out of the question. It takes a special sort of mental discipline to ignore 500 of hell's finest in full battle dress uniform, all displaced heads, unexpected limbs, and weird appendages creeping stealthily past you in the early hours of the morning. "Doc," said the thurifer at his elbow. "You're really good at this, aren't you?" The great goat swallowed hard. "Apparently," he said in his subconscious, he was wondering whether he could persuade Mr. Melrose to impose a retrospective rent increase, because the thought of performances like this every week for the next 3 months was enough to drive a man insane. He'd have to rethink all his cosy preconceptions about anatomy for a start. "Excuse me." The captain was talking to him. He forced himself to listen. "Sorry, I was miles away. Can I be of assistance?" "We're trying to get to—" The captain consulted a clipboard. "Place called Birmingham. Would you happen to know where that is?" "Birmingham?" "That's right. I've got this map here, but it hasn't photocopied terribly well. So if you could just send us on the right track, we'd be ever so grateful." His disbelief suspended on full pay, the great goat felt in the pockets of his robes and produced a pencil in the back of an envelope. Ah, the days of making notes on the back of an envelope or on a napkin or, with a pencil. I still have pencils. I still use pencils in my diary every single time I have to make a note. And I actually do literally pencil you in my diary. Yeah, it's true. And then, of course, if anything gets changed or cancelled or collected, you just rub it out. And your diary still looks pretty. Yes. I got a new hoodie today. And I love the front of it, but I'm not going to say anything about that because of certain things going on in the world. So, yes, I have an awesome new hoodie. It is bottle green. It is warm. The hood is a hoodie hood. It is a little bit too big, and that's perfect for lounging about the house. So, happy, joyed. It's all lined on the inside as well. It's snug. It's getting a bit chilly round here, but apparently it's going to be really, really hot tomorrow. The hotter than... hottest day on record for this time of year, which is actually not that warm. Yeah. Sorry, I've been a bit off colour the last few weeks, and I'm a bit off kilter today, but I'm doing my best, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. So, hopefully I'll bring you another in a couple of days. I know I keep saying a couple of days, and that's what it should be. It's just, I'm exhausted. I'm not even joking, I'm so tired, I can't even. But please, as ever, let me know how you are. I love your comments. It makes me happy. And if you don't want to leave a comment, send me an email. Let me know how things are going. Let me know how you're doing. I hope you're okay. And I hope you hydrate well if you're too hot. Hydrate well if you're not too hot, just as long as you keep hydrated. Keep warm if you're too cold. And I adore you guys very, very much. And thank you for your patience always. I appreciate you. Now take it easy. I'll see you soon, Petal.